Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 104. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another movie discussion where we journey into talking about a new movie that we got to check out in theaters or in streaming. We break down our thoughts, go over some pros and cons, favorite performances, and favorite moments. And then I'll recommend whether you guys should check it out in theaters or maybe wait for streaming or maybe even skip it. And then at the end of the podcast, I'll let you know my personal opinion on whether I think the film is timeless. Is it something that I would want to add to my movie collection and continue to rewatch over and over and over again? Before we talk about this week's movie, though, I did want to call out that episode 103 is available on all platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. On episode 103, I ended up talking about Clint Eastwood's newest movie, Juror Number 2. It stars Nicholas Hoult, and it is a courtroom drama, legal thriller, but it is a gripping story. I would definitely recommend you guys go check that movie out. And if you've already seen Juror Number 2, then go ahead and listen to episode 103 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Go into the comments or into the review sections and let me know, what did you think about the movie? Did you enjoy the story? And do you think that movie's timeless? Would really be curious to know your guys' thoughts. That way we can interact about that movie a little bit more. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about episode number 104, in which we are discussing A Complete Unknown, directed by James Mangold, and it stars Timothy Chalamet. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I was excited to watch A Complete Unknown. First reason is Timothy Chalamet. I really enjoyed and loved his performance in Dune Part 2. I know he's come out in various different projects in the past. I'm late to the party, I know, but I really enjoyed how he portrayed Paul Atreides, and it was such a complete 180 to how he performed it in Dune Part 1. And as soon as I saw that performance earlier this year, I was blown away, and I knew, okay, anytime Timothy Chalamet has a new film coming out, I'm going to be there because I know that he's going to put the effort into portraying a very interesting or complex character. I also heard that he committed 3 months or even more to not only trying to nail playing Bob Dylan, but also to perform the songs in the movie. So that just takes a full on commitment and obsession to make sure that it comes out great. So I really appreciated hearing that. And so that's again one of the main reasons why I was excited to watch A Complete Unknown was for Timothy Chalamet. Second reason is the director, James Mangold. James Mangold actually directed one of my favorite superhero movies in Logan. And not only is it one of my favorite superhero movies, it's actually considered one of the greatest superhero movies ever made as well. So I really enjoyed James Mangold's style, the different types of cinematic shots that he's able to pull off. I saw some of them in the trailers that got me excited. But he also has experience with musical biopics. He made Walk the Line as well in the past. And so I really enjoy his kind of style of directing. So that is the second reason why I wanted to check this movie out. Now, before jumping into the movie, a little bit more background on just my overall kind of thoughts as I watched Complete Unknown. I am not a big Bob Dylan fan. I know of him. I took a couple of courses in college around the history of rock music, and Bob Dylan would appear in various times as well. And so that's kind of how I got to know Bob Dylan and his music. So again, I'm not a diehard fan. I don't know his catalog of songs. So hopefully that kind of helps you get an idea as you hear my thoughts about this movie. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some non-spoiler thoughts now that I got to check out A Complete Unknown over the Christmas break. All right, guys, A Complete Unknown to me was a great movie. I had such a fun time checking this movie out. If there's one thing that I enjoyed the most out of the film was the musical performances. I mean, that's a given, right? It's a musical biopic, and you would think that, yeah, the music should be the best part, but I really enjoyed how they were all shot, that I enjoyed the different types of performances. And I think for me, as an outsider who is not a huge folk music fan or a Bob Dylan fan, I was excited to hear more of the music. I was excited after I heard Bob Dylan perform a song in the film. I was excited to know, okay, what's the next song? What's the next song? What else am I going to be able to catch in the songwriting of these performances? So that to me was a huge positive of the movie. Another thing that was also a big positive was how they were able to shoot these musical performances. A lot of great cinematic, slick shots were pulled off, to kind of make the venue of the specific performance feel very personal. Like if you were a part of the audience in some way. And you would see venues like a bar, or you would see a venue like a little theater, and sometimes it would be a festival. But every single time, at least me, this is how I felt. I felt like it was very much like the audience was a part of the actual performance. So, really good stuff of how they were able to pull that off. And then I think this one's pretty obvious, but I like to call it out anyway. The acting in this movie was incredible. Not only did Timothy Chalamet do really good as Bob Dylan, you also have Edward Norton, Monica Barbaro, you have Ellie Fanning, all of these different types of actors that in their roles add even more complexity to Bob Dylan's story. That just again added it to the engagement that I had with this film. So, really good stuff. Nothing but good things to say about this movie. Let me kind of dive in and give you a good setup as to the synopsis of the movie. Again, I'm not going to fully spoil the plot, but I at least want to let you know what this film is about if you're still on the fence to check it out. The film drops you in the year 1961, in which you're following a Bob Dylan who is hitchhiking a ride to New York. He is basically on a mission to meet his hero, Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie is a folk singer and an icon, and so he is currently at the hospital. And Bob Dylan ends up going to that hospital in order to visit him, to get to know him, even though he has no connection with Woody at all. And in that meeting, he not only gets to meet his hero Woody, but he also gets to meet Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton. And there, Bob Dylan ends up performing a song in front of them that he wrote about Woody. And as he performs the song, you could just see from Pete Seeger's perspective how blown away he is at the performance and the songwriting specifically that Bob Dylan was able to pull off. So much so that Pete ends up inviting Bob Dylan to his home, and then he actually invites him to New York to take part in the folk music scene. And he, invites him to a bar, different open mics, has him perform and some of his shows. And as you start seeing Bob Dylan making waves in music, he also ends up meeting Sylvie Russo, who is played by Ellie Fanning. Now, at that moment, you have Bob Dylan and Sylvie kind of start going out, having a connection, and then they start having a relationship. And from there, everything takes off for Bob Dylan. He starts becoming famous. He has his own album, starts performing more and more songs, goes on tours. All this different stuff starts going in favor of Bob Dylan. And eventually, by the third act, it all culminates in the year 1965 at the Newport Folk Festival, where Bob Dylan is set to perform, and this performance ends up becoming a key moment in music history. So again, I'll leave it at that. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything else in regards to the plot from here. Obviously, I'll kind of jump into a little bit more spoilers and the pros and cons, but I at least wanted to kind of set you up with what this film is trying to tell us about Bob Dylan. Overall, I really enjoyed A Complete Unknown. Again, the musical performances, the acting, the cinematography, everything just worked for me. And that's coming from a person that is not a huge fan of Bob Dylan or folk music. Everything just worked. I was engaged with all the different types of songwriting ability, the obsession that Bob Dylan had. Everything just worked for me. So my recommendation would be definitely go check this movie out in theaters. A Complete Unknown is definitely something that will keep you engaged all the way through. If you're not a fan of musical biopics, this one will probably not convince you. So again, you don't have to check that out. But again, if you're interested in Bob Dylan, if you like music in general and just are curious to know more about Bob Dylan's career, this is a great way to check this out and kind of just get a little bit of a glimpse, a little window into Bob Dylan's life and how, the different types of complexities and challenges that he faced. So that would be my recommendation. Definitely check this one out in theaters. All right, those are some of the non-spoiler thoughts. Now let's go ahead and dive into some pros and cons, and I'll start spoiling a little bit more details about what I enjoyed about A Complete Unknown. So if you have not checked out the movie, definitely jump out of the video, watch it, and then come back so you can hear my full thoughts. That way you can see if we agree or disagree on some of the things that I'm going to call out. All right, hopefully that gives you enough time, but let's jump in. First pro of A Complete Unknown for me is the cinematography. My goodness, the musical scenes were excellent. Anytime they would perform, whether it was Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, it just felt like it was performed not only to perfection, but also how it was able to kind of make the audience feel like you were there. It was intimate. It felt real and authentic. And I love it when a movie can pull in the audience in that kind of a way. And what I mean by the performance feeling very intimate is, there's specific, camera shots where you have either Joan Baez or you have Bob Dylan. They're performing in front of a crowd, and instead of doing multiple cuts so you can see people's reactions, instead the camera stays right on the performer and then it slowly pans left or it slowly pans right. That way you can still see the performance that is being done by the artist, but you also get to see the reactions of the audience. And again, it feels like you're there with them. It feels like you're on stage right next to them. Maybe it feels like you're in the front row or backstage, but it just feels very personal. And I love that. I appreciated how they were able to pull that off for not only Bob Dylan, but for other musical performances that were in A Complete Unknown. So really enjoyed how they were able to do that cinematically. And again, great job to the director and the cinematographer and other folks involved in the movie, because again, it pulled me in. And again, coming from the outside, I'm not a huge fan of this music. I was engaged. I wanted to know more. I wanted to capture and make sure that I was recording every word that was being said by Bob Dylan or Joan Baez or any other performer in the movie. Also, what I really enjoyed was there were certain musical scenes between Bob Dylan and other performers that felt very real. You had Bob Dylan performing with Pete Seeger in front of a couple of executives that, again, they're just performing on a couch in a small room, but it feels very much like you're a part of the room experiencing something, something that's just off the cuff, something improvised. Then you have Bob Dylan playing with the blues player Jesse Moffett. Jesse Moffett is just a made up character in this world, but they end up performing just, riffing, coming up with, tunes that they're just coming up on the fly and coming up with music and just going with the flow. And I really appreciated that. But if I had to call out some of the best performances and some of the best scenes, it had to be between Joan Baez and Bob Dylan. Their chemistry while singing was incredible. It was palpable. You could feel the chemistry in regards to how they were performing certain songs. Sometimes Joan and Bob were just performing in their bedroom. Sometimes they were performing in front of thousands of fans. No matter where it was, they were always looking at each other, always so focused. And it felt very much like they were having some type of a relationship on stage, which, funny enough, they actually did have a relationship in the film as well. So their chemistry together, when they sang, it just felt very intimate. It felt realistic. It was believable. And when it's something that's so believable in a film, that just makes me appreciate much more of what's going on in the story. And again, it doesn't make me doubt about what's going on or anything else. It doesn't make my mind wander. So that to me, again, was a long-winded first pro, but to me, again, it's the cinematography of the musical performances and really the performances overall of all the actors that were singing within this film. Second pro for me is the costume and the set design. I'll start off with the set design. I mean, you see it immediately from the first sequences when you're in New York in the 1960s. Bob Dylan is walking the streets. Maybe he's going to a record shop. Maybe he's going to a bar. But everything from him walking the streets, the sound of the cars and the taxis coming by, the noise of New York City, everything felt so authentic and so much like you were actually there, actually walking with Bob Dylan and Sylvie and just getting to know the city of where they lived in. Everything about it just felt like it, again, nothing felt like they were in the studio. Nothing felt like it was CGI or not real. Everything looked like either they filmed it in New York or they set up a backlot that felt like New York. But I think they nailed the set design. And then even the costumes, what people were wearing, everything fit in regards to the 1960s and the era that they were in. And can I say that Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan, he looks so freaking cool. The glasses that he would wear, the suits that he had, the different types of jackets, the button-up shirts, everything from the style that Bob Dylan wore, it just worked so well for me in the movie. And again, it made me appreciate that kind of style. And I wanted the glasses that Timothée Chalamet had that he was wearing as he portrayed Bob Dylan. It just, everything from the costumes of not only Bob Dylan, but other characters as well. Everything just made sense as to what was being told within the story. And again, I feel like I've mentioned this before, but when you don't have to worry about the set design, when you don't have to worry about what people are wearing, when you just buy in and suspend your disbelief, it makes the story much more impactful and it makes you focus on the story a lot more. So really appreciated that as well. Third pro, this one's really simple, and I'm pretty sure other folks will probably notice this, but I really enjoyed that the film was only about Bob Dylan's life for 4 years. It basically takes place from 1961 to 1965, and that's it. I really enjoyed that. I know that there's a couple of musical biopics that want to show you from beginning to end of that specific artist, but I think it's a lot better when you have just a glimpse, just a little moment, a little sliver of what this artist may have gone through during a specific period of their life. One of the reasons why I think I enjoy that is because it kind of just gives you, challenges that they may have experienced, and it kind of just shows you, like, in that specific moment, what was their mindset? What were they going through in that specific, time of living? For Bob Dylan, he was going through a lot of different types of civil rights movements. He was going through, presidents being assassinating. So you were seeing a lot of different things that were changing in the US, and that would kind of get reflected in his music as well. But really appreciated that they didn't delve too much into, okay, we're going to start from when he was younger, then go all the way to what he is now, again, because Bob Dylan is still alive. But I really appreciated that it's just 4 years. That's all you need to focus on. And that way it doesn't delve into too much as to what has been going on as of recent time. Another film that I appreciated that did that was the Bob Marley movie that came out earlier in 2024. They did something very similar. They just took a piece of Bob Marley's life, not the whole thing, just a piece. He's already a singer, he's already well known in Jamaica, but I think that just works a lot better for an artist. I don't think we need to see their entire story. I think just pinpointing a lot of key moments on how they may have shifted their life, or really lives of other people or industries. I think that's what's probably the key thing that works very well. So, again, another thing I got to call out before I forget is also how they ended this movie. They ended the movie with fans actually hating on Bob Dylan because of what he performed at the Newport Folk Festival. He ended up performing electrical music. He actually, was still performing kind of folk in a way, but he was using an electric guitar, and people hated on him for it. He ended the movie feeling free, like he was not constrained anymore, like he was finally able to have the artistic freedom that he was looking for. So very cool way to end the movie, where in most cases when you have a musical biopic, you have the artist end on a high note. In this one, Bob kind of ends in a specific spot where fans are just kind of almost turning on him, but inside of himself he's like, you know what, I did it because I wanted to do it, not because anybody told me to. So really appreciated that. Okay, moving on to cons in regards to A Complete Unknown. I didn't really have too many. I didn't have any notes. Again, broken record time. Just because I have no notes does not mean that this movie is a perfection. It does not mean that it's a 10 out of 10. It just means that I didn't have anything that really caught my eye or anything I can nitpick. Maybe if I watch it a second time, it would, something else would kind of come out. But as of today, I don't really have any cons in regards to A Complete Unknown. So, with that, let's go ahead and dive into some more positives. Favorite performance that I had in A Complete Unknown. Real simple, straightforward. Timothée Chalamet is my favorite performance of A Complete Unknown. I thought he nailed Bob Dylan. Now, again, please note, I am not a huge fan of Bob Dylan. I've seen him in different interviews. I've seen different types of historical pieces about him, and again, the impact that he had on rock and really music in general. But in just those kind of pieces, I thought that Timothée Chalamet nailed the cadence, the tone of how he would speak. Sometimes you couldn't understand him, sometimes you could. And I think what was so impressive is that Timothée Chalamet actually sang all of the songs in the film. Being able to not only try to portray a character like Bob Dylan, but also be able to sing as well. That's just another level of ability that I wish I had, but I don't. So Timothée Chalamet just being able to portray Bob Dylan, sing the songs, but also play a very complex character. Bob Dylan is not he's not a perfect guy. He's not good. Sometimes he was bad to other people, bad to people that he really loved. He just was a very complicated man. So I really enjoyed the overall performance, and I really enjoyed that they didn't try to make Bob Dylan be this figure of, yeah, let's make him inspiring. No, I mean, he's still inspired in various different ways, but not because he was a good guy. It was because he wanted freedom. He didn't want to be told what to do. Other than that, again, his whole life was filled with challenges. He had affairs with Sylvie by getting with Joan Baez. There was a lot of different things that went on and challenges that he faced. But again, that just added so much to the performance that Timothy Chalamet was able to do. So again, with all that said, Timothy Chalamet is my favorite performance in A Complete Unknown. Favorite moment for me was a conversation between Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan. This actually happens in the third act of the movie. They're at the Newport Folk Festival. And again, this is at a point where Bob is being told that he should not be playing with electrical music. He needs to stick with folk. This is a folk festival. And so with that, it starts kind of making Bob Dylan feel like he's being put in a box, which he does not want. And so Pete Seeger, he's really the organizer of the folk festival. He goes and he starts talking to Bob Dylan very early in the morning, I might say. He wakes everybody up from his crew, and everybody's kind of getting mad, getting upset at Pete Seeger. And Bob Dylan, even though again he's at a specific point in his life where he doesn't have to really listen to anybody, he still respects Pete Seeger. And so he tells everybody, "Hey, listen up. Let's see what Pete has to say." And Pete ends up kind of telling him a specific type of a story about how a seesaw should be balanced, how he has to contribute in the right way. And he feels like because of the impact, because of the influence that Bob Dylan has, he should play folk music in order to balance things out. Maybe there might be a time and place for him to play electrical music, but Pete feels that Bob Dylan should not play the electrical music at the folk festival. And it's just a very personal conversation where again, Pete isn't getting upset. He respects Bob Dylan and Bob Dylan respects Pete Seeger. And they both see eye to eye. And that's something rare, I think, in the movie up to that point. Bob Dylan feels like he can really do whatever he wants and he can really, ignore and not do what other people tell him. But for Pete Seeger, he still listens. He still wants to make sure that he's doing right by Pete. Even though Pete Seeger wants him to play folk music, he you could tell on Bob Dylan's face he wasn't happy about that decision. And so that whole conversation, how it all played out, how personal it felt, I really enjoyed it. And again, it just shows you that even as big as Bob Dylan, as big as his stardom got in the film, he always had the respect for Pete Seeger. And likewise, even for Pete Seeger, no matter how big of a superstar Bob Dylan was, he was able to get right in his face and tell him what he felt. So really cool stuff and a great scene that played out in the third act. All right, now favorite shot of A Complete Unknown. I had several great cinematic shots that I really want to call out, but if I had to choose one, I'm going to go with this awesome silhouette shot of Bob Dylan as he is performing in front of a crowd. I'm a sucker for silhouette shots. I don't know why. It just looks so awesome when they stick with it for a couple seconds. But there's this one awesome shot where the camera's behind Bob Dylan. He's performing in front of a crowd, but it's kind of angled at a way where it's like kind of looking up to Bob Dylan's back. And you just see a spotlight right over him. And he's just performing a song with his guitar. It looks so awesome. I would love to have that as like a frame or a shot as like a poster. It just looks so damn cool. This whole movie just has that vibe of being cool. I don't know. The director and the team that created the movie, they just nailed that kind of a vibe. And this shot alone, the silhouette shot, kind of embodies that type of a vibe as well. So those are my favorite performance, favorite moment, and favorite shots of A Complete Unknown. Now it is time to decide, is this movie timeless? Would I rewatch A Complete Unknown over and over again and add it to my movie collection? This is a tough decision, guys. Again, I've been kind of mulling it over for the last couple of days. And as of today, I will say that A Complete Unknown is not a timeless movie for me. I have nothing but positive things to say. I enjoyed my journey that I got to experience of Bob Dylan, from him again starting off, getting to meet his hero, and then becoming the superstar that he is today. Again, I enjoyed all that. I enjoyed the musical performances, but I don't think there's, apart from that, apart from the music that played out in the film, I don't know if there's a lot for me to rewatch if I were to kind of add this to my movie collection. Now, I would still want to recommend this to other folks. That way, you guys can kind of check it out and see the glimpse of what Bob Dylan had to do to kind of make it in folk music and eventually kind of make it past folk music. But again, I think after watching it once, I again really enjoyed the performances, really enjoyed from an acting and a musical standpoint, how it all played out. But again, there's not a lot that would kind of get me back into it other than just kind of watching some of the performances of Joan Baez and Bob Dylan together. But other than that, I got out of it what I needed to. I got to know more about Bob Dylan, a lot of what he was facing from 1961 to 1965, and how much of a free spirit he was. And I think that that's really, again, for me, that was enough. That's all I really needed. One of the other reasons why I think it's also not timeless is because, again, I'm not a die-hard fan of Bob Dylan. I feel like if I really was into his music and his catalog of all the different types of, songs that he's been able to come up with in the songwriting, I feel like maybe that would push me more towards making it timeless. But as of today, this movie would not be one that I would want to rewatch over and over and over again. However, I still would want to push other people to check this movie out. It's still a great experience, and it's such a cool journey to kind of see the different types of settings and the musical performances that are played out. But that's just my opinion, guys. What about you? What do you think about A Complete Unknown? Did you enjoy the movie? Who was your favorite performance? And do you think this movie is timeless? Let me know in the comments or the review sections of wherever you're listening to. I would really love to know your guys' thoughts and opinions. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening all the way through to get my full thoughts about A Complete Unknown. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 104 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we talk about the last movie that I got to watch for 2024, and it will be about Nosferatu. All right, guys. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you guys later.